What's going on, guys? Andrew Piluk Hockey here, back again with another video. And please, I know I've said this before, but if you're new to this channel, make sure to watch this video. You don't even have to subscribe. I would hope you would. But if you are watching this video, please watch till the end. I have a lot of information, and I don't want people to get misunderstood by only watching half of the video. I need you to watch the whole thing, even if you stop watching it and watch the rest tomorrow or the next day or the next day. There's going to be a lot that I need to talk about in here, and a lot that you're probably going to agree with me on, some that you'll disagree with. But make sure to comment down below so we can have a constructive conversation. And you know what? It's time I finally give my thoughts on the whole big picture. I've made separate videos about it before, but this TSN video that came out yesterday was the last straw for me. It was absolutely insane. Mark Masters, Craig Button, I have the most, respect for you and everybody who works at TSN and Sportsnet and all the other media outlets out there. But enough is enough. This is getting absolutely ridiculous. Whenever the clicks are down on websites or the clicks are down on certain pages, people go ahead and talk about the Leafs and make another ridiculous headline. And this time, I have it on my phone. TSN Turning Point, which, by the way, they started with the Maple Leafs because the Maple Leafs are the ones that will get them the most clicks, of course, which, again, makes sense. If you're going from a company standpoint, it does make sense. But not when you make up ridiculous headlines like, when did the Leafs rebuild veer off path? Wow. When I read that, I couldn't believe that that was real. When did it veer off path? What? Are we going to talk about other teams that have veered off path? How come the Leafs are the only team that seems to rebuild and doesn't work? Because I have facts to prove that it has been working, and they're not off of path. And there's other teams around the league, like, hello Oilers fans, how's Nail Yakupov doing? How'd that work out for you? How about all the other first round picks? Are we not talking about that anymore, TSN? How about teams that make trades and draft and this, that, and the other, and they can't get into the playoffs? The Leafs have been there. So did those other teams veer off path? And this isn't even coming as a biased fan. I'm sure fans around the league are sick and tired of watching this crap. It's annoying. This is ridiculous. You don't have to like the Leafs, but anybody with brain cells would realize that this rebuild is not over and they haven't veered off path. So I've got information in front of me. It's about 4 pages worth of stuff. So buckle in. There's going to be graphics on the screen. You're going to see numbers. You're going to see a lot. So this won't just be a discussion video. You're going to see facts. Not opinions, facts. Okay? And this didn't just come from me. So those people will get their credit. Now, this is what I want to start off with. So basically the video showed like the background of how the rebuild started, and it went well. You had Shanahan come in, Lou come in, Babcock come in, Dubas. You had the whole, bunch of them. And all of them had their part of making this team really good, and some of them had their part of making this team bad. There's two sides to everything. But the thing that they started off with talking about was, Craig Button mentioned that it started to veer off. The Maple Leafs rebuild started to veer off in July of 2018 when the Toronto Maple Leafs signed John Tavares to an $11 million contract. The biggest free agent in recent memory, took less money to come to Toronto. The market value was $13 million. There were multiple teams that were offering that much, and one of them was the San Jose Sharks that made it very clear that they wanted to go after him. It's... How is signing John Tavares a problem? I don't get it, and we will get to the both sides of that. Please don't comment until you hear my full opinion. I'm sick and tired of the rebuilding issues. That's not a rebuild issue. The Leafs have had so many people come after them while this rebuild has come on, okay? They've done better and better every year, which I'll show a statistic, or at least hovered around the same spot, but in a playoff spot as being one of the best teams in the NHL, and they've fixed some of their issues, and there's more issues that need to be fixed going forward. We'll get back to that in a second, and I'm also going to prove with an Armchair GM why the Leafs will have room to do things and why they would have this year without the problems with the virus and stuff like that. So the first graph you're going to see, graphic right here that you're going to see on the screen, is their seasons, their point totals, their wins, everything like that, what's gone up, what's gone down, everything like that. But look at the point column, okay? In 2015-16, they were 30th in the league. They ended up getting Austin Matthews, right? Then they jumped up all the way to 14th in the league, and they ended up getting 95 points. They had a really good record, and they surprised everybody and got into the playoffs. So that's when the rebuild was catapulted. They went a bit quicker than people thought they would. Then the next year, they jumped to 7th in the entire league, okay? They ended up with 105 points. So again, that's an improvement. They ended up in the playoffs, round 1 loss again. Mind you, the first loss to the Washington Capitals was a good series. The one against Boston, of course, heartbreak again. And then the next year, 100 points, so 5-point difference. You can't say they got a lot worse. They just didn't, those extra 5 points. I mean, technically, they got worse in a sense of they lost those 5 points, but other teams around them also got better as well. And but the thing is they still finished 7th in the entire league, and they ended up 3rd in the Atlantic for the second year, second year in a row. Obviously resulted in a round 1 loss, but still in the playoffs, good team, taking steps every year. Then this year, with the poor start, which I will get to, the Mike Babcock issue, they had 81 points. They're still in a playoff spot, and when this season is ultimately canceled, which it will be, that's where they're going to end up. So clearly a step back, but in terms of what's gone on this year, what I will bring up in a second, you'll understand why. So the next thing I need to bring up is the team consistently getting better because they made changes. And while I don't agree with everything that the Leafs management has done, like I said, Shanahan, Lou, Babs, Dubas have all made this team better. This team progressively has shown signs of getting better every year, and that's been going on. So now I'm going to get back to this TSN ridiculousness because after the Leafs showed promise and took steps to get bigger and better, Lou's contract went up. And this is going to be a bit of a timeline. So when Lou's contract was up, it was no secret that Lou and the Maple Leafs both knew that Dubas was going to be taking over. Hunter was never getting this job. Lou knew that his job was to get Dubas into that position to be the GM. They brought him in to be a wizard with the cap with his boy Brandon Pridham, and they were supposed to take over in the new age of the NHL, which is what happened. So another thing I need to bring up here is when Dubas took over, people are like, well, Lou handed him the Ferrari, and oh my God, sure, the Leafs were really good. But Lou handed him a lot of problems too, and a lot of problems that Lou created himself. So, people are acting like Dubas just acquired a cup team right when he got there. No, they were still in a rebuild. Dubas acquired a team that still needed more fixing. So, what did he do? He signed John Tavares as his first move, okay? He signed a massive contract. His first major move was to get the best free agent in recent memory. Craig Button said that the signing was unnecessary. Well, sorry, Craig Button, you're incorrect. So this is what I don't understand. When you make your offense better and deeper and you acquire more depth, most times when you see during the media, they say, oh my God, they got better, they got deeper, and that's what you need to be a playoff team. So the Leafs get that, and all of a sudden it's a problem again. Now, I will get to the blue line, but he brought up Kadri, and Nazem Kadri was my favorite player. I wanted him to be a Leaf and to continue to play a big role, but him being on the third line was extreme depth. You had 3 guys that could score 30 goals in their sleep, 1, 2, and 3 as your 3 centermen. That's depth, okay? I don't understand how it's a problem to have that. It's a great problem to have if you have 3 guys that can do that. So where's the problem there? So they always talk about having depth, but then the Leafs do it and they mention that it's a problem. Now, and I get one thing that he said, the blue line. The Leafs needed to address that blue line. But let me just ask you real quick, what did Lou Lamoriello do to address that blue line? People said that he was a cap wizard and being able to get guys on cheaper contracts and bring in big names, but last time I checked, he didn't bring in a blue liner. He brought in Thomas Plekanec and Brian Boyle, 2 fourth-line players, and gave up second-round picks for both of them. So, again, I like Lou, but let's not give him everything here. So, anyways, back to the blue lines. The Leafs could have spent that money on the defenseman, sure, but Kyle Dubas knew that there was a bigger plan, and keep in mind, Dubas did get one, and we will get to that. So, John Tavares came into Toronto, made Marner better, and Leaf fans, Tavares made Marner better. The numbers are there. Marner's a fantastic player. I love him. But John Tavares made Marner better, and that's what Tavares has been doing his whole career. He scored his career high in goals and points Wow, that sounds like such a bad move, right? Terrible move to bring in a guy like that who just got his career high in points and made one of your young stars even better. Now, keep in mind, the biggest problem that Leaf fans and management have had, and analysts as well, because we know that they can't keep their mouth shut about it, is cap space. So they knew the cap was going up. That was the reason why the management team brought in all these cap wizards. That's why Dubas was in that spot. That's why Brandon Pridham was in that spot. With the new TV deal coming, and Seattle coming in, the new team coming in, the new TV deal, the league was going to see a massive increase. In the next 4 years, you were going to see that salary cap go up to close to $100 million. Like, that was projected what it was going to be. It was going to be pretty damn close to that. That would give the Leafs a boatload of space to continue to acquire pieces while having their core locked up for years to come. So they wouldn't have had to worry about signing any of their big-name young players because they would be grooming into their prime. You would have John Tavares still playing pretty well, but you would have a ton of space and it wouldn't be an issue. But because of this virus, of course, that's knocking the NHL down a couple legs. So you're basically never expecting something like this to happen. But because of the Leafs' plan, they knew that getting Tavares would help this team and they'd still be able to add, which we will get to that. So what did Dubas add in terms of defensemen? Well, he got Jake Muzzin, and people still found a reason to complain even though Jake Muzzin has been the Leafs' best defenseman since he got here. And that's a fact. It's not an opinion, that's a fact. So he also did that without touching their main roster. He didn't have to trade somebody off their roster or a high prospect. He gave up a first-round pick, but that first-round pick is not going to do more for the Leafs than Jake Muzzin has done. Keep in mind, Dubas also found gold in the second round drafting Nick Robertson, who is going to be a Maple Leaf probably by next season. He's incredible. So basically, the Leafs were still unsatisfied, and by that I mean Mike Babcock. For some reason he came out and still said that it wasn't enough, even though he acquired somebody that could immediately play as a top pairing guy for their team, and it was kind of ridiculous because, I mean, it was a dumb statement, okay? Because this came from Mr. Listmaker himself, and of course he hates lots of things anyways. He hates happiness and respect, so I mean, no surprise. Anyways, after the Leafs were bounced again, it was time to make another move. So the Leafs traded Nazem Kadri, who again was my favorite player. They brought in a replacement for the third line in Kerfoot, who was pretty much putting up similar numbers, made a bit less, but he was still putting up pretty good numbers and was good on both ends of the ice. They also acquired Tyson Barrie, a top four guy who was brought in to feed the puck to the Leafs. Now, here's the thing. Keep in mind, the ultimate reason Kadri was traded was because of his discipline. I was a big fan of him, but he got suspended in back-to-back playoffs. If he doesn't do that crap in Boston, I believe the Leafs win that series. They were already up. They had 2 chances to finish that series in Game 6 and 7, and they didn't do it. They could have used Nazem Kadri. Him and Nylander looked amazing on that third line. That would have given them 3 dangerous lines going into that game. They couldn't do it, because Nazem Kadri was a guy that made that team better. But when you can't trust a guy when it comes down to the playoffs, you have to trade him and get another piece that you can work with. So Dubas got 2 pieces that he could use. And keep in mind, Calle Rosen is back on the Leafs now. So Dubas ended up just giving up essentially Nazem Kadri and, spare pieces, and got a top 4 defenseman plus a third line centerman that the Leafs needed. So I don't understand where the problem is there. The trade, in my opinion, could have been better, but he did get 2 big pieces. Now, Dubas also gets no credit for trading the terrible contracts of Patrick Marleau, even though Lou Lamoriello had a choice of Justin Williams provided by my friend Downtown Stephen Brown. He brought up to me that Justin Williams was able to sign a 2-year deal for less money with the Maple Leafs, but he ultimately chose Patrick Marleau to pay more money and give him an extra year, even though he knew it would be a problem. And that cost the Leafs a first-round pick, and that is Lou's fault, not Kyle Dubas's. Then he also had to trade the terrible Nikita Zaitsev deal, also signed by everybody's favorite GM, Lou Lamoriello, who gave him a terrible long-term contract. Dubas traded Connor Brown, who also was a little bit overpaid for what he was doing with the Leafs. I wish him all the best. I love Connor Brown. I also really like Nikita Zaitsev, but they both were mislabeled by Leaf fans as being good defensively, and they weren't. They were both not good in their own end. Connor Brown, his advanced analytics show that people think that he's some great, amazing defensive wizard, but he's really not. He was sheltered by other players, and he also did have some bad line mates at some points, but he needed to be traded. So they ended up getting 1 year of Cody Ceci. Now, I'll get to Ceci in a second, but he ended up getting rid of all of those bad contracts to be able to keep guys like Andreas Janssen and Kasperi Kapanen, while being able to add other guys to sign Kerfoot to a longer-term deal, which was also a pretty good signing. So I don't know why Dubas doesn't get credit for that. Now, start the season, Babcock is playing Hall a little bit more, which is great. Only took him a year or so to learn Justin Hall's name. Not sure. I think he definitely is getting closer to retirement with not being able to realize what talent you have. Only took him a year, like I said, to learn his name. He also played Ceci as a top pairing defenseman, which clearly that wasn't the point. Ceci came in here, he was supposed to be on the bottom pairing, maybe some minutes on the second pairing. He was supposed to get sheltered so the Leafs could flip him to another team to be able to acquire that cap space to bring in another piece. But because Babcock ruined him, made him play minutes that he shouldn't have, his value just went out the window. Then they also had Tyson Barrie playing as a top four defensive style defenseman. Mike Babcock wanted him to change the way that he played, even though he had been playing the same way his whole career, which is absolutely atrocious. I'm not sure why you would want to change somebody's playing style like that, but I mean, it doesn't really surprise me. He wasn't supposed to be there. Babcock made him fail. And right when Babcock left, Sheldon Keefe gave him the keys to do whatever he wanted. And, defensively, he stepped up a little bit when Riley was out. You guys can look at the numbers. I know people just don't listen, but Tyson Barrie isn't good defensively. I will agree with you there, but he wasn't as terrible as people were saying. Like I said, under Sheldon Keefe, Barrie has had his point pace go to where he was previous in his career. So, I don't know what Babcock was thinking, but here's the thing. To Babcock, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. More like break everything because my ego is big as the Rogers Center. Ain't that right, Babs? Because that's clearly what you did. So he was playing role players too much, and, he was still costing the Leafs games by playing Michael Hutchinson against rivals, teams that are much better, that the Leafs should be playing Frederik Andersen in. Then he was playing Freddie Andersen against bottom-of-the-league teams, and it wasn't good. Now, let's say the Leafs get an extra 2 to 3 wins if Babcock actually plays the goaltenders where they're supposed to be. That would give the Leafs, let's say, 6 points, all right? You could say 4, 6 points, whatever. That gives them a big cushion against Florida where they are right now, because that would give them the space that they need. This wouldn't even be a conversation right now. That's also me being nice. I feel like they could have got a little bit more points too. Keefe got hired, and guys like Barrie, Nylander, etc. started to play better. The team was more engaged, but goaltending was still a problem. They were pretty bad. It was still costing the Leafs a lot of points. So while Babcock was an issue, so was the goaltending. At one point, Hutchinson and Anderson were the two worst goaltenders in the league during a 5-game stretch. Anderson, playing as a .910 save percentage, would have got the Leafs way more points. We wouldn't be in this situation. But there's been times where Freddie's playing as a sub 900 goaltender. He's costing the Leafs games. You can score 4 or 5 goals, but when Freddie's giving up 5 or 6, you can't win games like that. So both of them were pretty bad. But one thing I need to also bring up is how people are still after Sheldon Keefe. And this comes from the Oak Leafs on Twitter, and I'll show you guys right now. When that TSN article came out, the Oak Leafs is actually the Twitter account that I seen that promoted it. And he said, in the 47 games under Sheldon Keefe, the Leafs, despite a significant stretch of league-worst goaltending, were a whole 6-point back of heavyweights Tampa Bay and Boston. Tavares had a point per game, tying him for 21st overall in that span. Yes, the Leafs rebuild is an unmitigated disaster. So there you go. The Leafs were literally playing much better under Sheldon Keefe. They were right in the race with Boston and Tampa. But again, the media's spinning that the Leafs are falling apart, which doesn't make sense. Under Keefe, the Leafs are playing much better than they did under Babcock. Matthews was about to hit 50 goals. Nylander was having a 30-plus goal year, a breakthrough year for him. While battling injuries, Marner and Tavares were also still putting up big numbers, while they, of course, can take some blame because it's, whatever. It's a team game. You have to blame everybody, but they were still putting up big numbers. Here's the thing. The fans are pointing at the wrong people still. And it's also the media. Babcock ruined a quarter of the Leafs season for them. The Leafs goaltending was terrible. Injuries took up a bunch of their success. Some depth players have not succeeded in their roles as well. Now, let's get back to Dubas here, because sure, let's put a little bit of blame on Dubas, because guess what? It's a team game. So sure, Dubas could have made a couple other moves, maybe took a little bit more off of that Marner contract, but for all we know, Marner didn't want to stay here because of Mike Babcock, so who knows? Austin Matthews is playing like one of the best goal scorers we've seen in a long time in the NHL. He's one of the best in the league at goal scoring. He's putting up monster numbers. Teams like Arizona were willing to give him a $17 million offer sheet. So the Leafs getting him at that number seems pretty decent to me. Mitch Marner was being offered $13 million by the Columbus Blue Jackets on a 7-year deal for an offer sheet. Marner didn't want to sign that. He wanted a shorter-term deal like I brought up before. So teams were also willing to give Mitch Marner more money than that. So while the Leafs overpaid, they didn't pay as much as other teams were willing to pay for those guys as well. So we need to go back to Dubas again, because he added guys like Kerfoot, Barrie, Muzzin, Hall, Engvall, Spezza, Mikheyev, and most of them have been great when they are healthy. That's a lot of depth. They've looked really good with the Leafs. Spezza was league min. Engvall's on a really cheap extension, and he's shown signs of being a really good player. Justin Hall took on way too much responsibility this year, but he had to because of the injuries, and his extension will look really good once he's not having to play in a crazy role like he had to this year. Muzzin is the best Leafs defenseman by far. Barrie under Sheldon Keefe has been better. Kerfoot has been better under Keefe as well, but I still think Kerfoot has a chance of being traded this offseason. Now, I also need to say don't blame Keefe, because he's made improvements to this team, coached them to a much better record than Babcock. And let's start to look at the big picture and point some fingers at players who were brought here to do their job, and they didn't do it. Dubas and Keefe can't play for these guys. They have to play for themselves. And let's also stop trying to make a scapegoat in this city. Everybody picks a player to run out of town, and the media does it as well. They love to do it. Leaf fans love it. They watch the games to find bad things. They don't watch the games to find good things. They try to find bad things. They don't watch to enjoy the games. They watch to piss everybody off. Nylander this, Nylander that, okay? Leaf fans literally want this guy to get dragged out of town, which is hilarious. He's proven that he's worth the contract. He's playing better than most guys at his cap hit. I also find it funny when people come and comment on my videos or say in the media that they need to trade Nylander for a top 2 defenseman, but then they turn around and say that this guy sucks. So tell me, think before you speak. If he sucks, how are we getting a top 2 defenseman? Because if he sucks, nobody should want him, right? Logic, people. Logic, okay? Just wait until you see some of these other players around the league. People are like, well, look at this contract. He doesn't sign for $10 million. This guy in Boston, he didn't take that much money. This guy in Florida, this guy, whatever. Just wait. Just wait. Just wait when their contracts are up. They're going to be getting their deals. They're not going to be going for sweetheart deals. They know that they're going to get paid, and players are getting paid. Teams around the league have been overpaying players like crazy. They will get their money too. Stop making your, stupid armchair GMs that make no sense. You look like you made them when you're blindfolded. Dubas is not getting fired unless he makes absolutely no moves at the end of this year. Then there's a chance he gets fired, and there will be a video going up. But Dubas has done everything he can to make this team better. Lou did as much as he could before. He made a couple mistakes. Dubas has made his mistakes. Everybody's made mistakes, but not enough to get fired because he's brought in talent. Lou brought in talent. Dubas brought in talent. Now it's time for those players to really step it up here. Let's also look at other teams like Vancouver, who's paying guys who score once in a blue moon millions of dollars. How about Buffalo paying Skinner and Okposo a boatload to score 30 points a season? I'd rather pay big money to guys who get 80 points in their sleep than to give a guy like Jeff Skinner $9 million a year to be injured and score 25 to 30 points, looking like he didn't know how to be a $5 million player out there. So let's not talk about that crap. So, and for the point I made earlier about how the Leafs would have been in a good spot even with the salary cap problems, because the salary cap would have went up and there wouldn't have been too many problems because there were going to be players that would get traded this offseason. So before the pandemic, it was reported that the cap was going up to anywhere between $84 to $88 million. And we know that the NHL, being the cheap league that they are, they'll go for the minimum. So it's $84 million that would have been the cap hit this year. Even 83.5 would have been fine. But this is what I would have done, and this is going to be a little bit of an over-exaggeration so that way you guys understand what the Leafs could have done. Now, looking at it with an $84 million cap hit, let's say the Leafs overpay in a trade to get Josh Manson, because I do believe this is a little bit of an overpayment. Andreas Johnsson, Timothy Liljegren, because you have to have a centerpiece, Jeremy Bracco, who doesn't really have any value anymore, but he's kind of a throw into this deal, and a 2021 first round pick. So you're giving Johnsson a 20 goal scorer, a guy who still has potential to be a better player. The Ducks are going to need more scoring. They don't know how to score goals. They're old. They need more goal scoring. Timothy Liljegren is the centerpiece to this deal. I wouldn't want to give him up. And you can also sub in Abramov into this deal as well if you feel like that's a better suited way for the Leafs to make this deal. He's a high-end prospect that the Leafs have right now, so you could insert him into that deal as well. And then Bracco in that first round pick. That first round pick would be huge for Anaheim as well, because they want to acquire as many young pieces as they can. So you acquire Josh Manson. Then you trade Kerfoot to anybody. I just picked Detroit in this situation, but any team that's looking for another centerman who can give them some points and play, maybe in a little bit bigger of a role, you probably are getting a little bit more than a third and fourth round pick. But again, to just over exaggerate a little bit, I just didn't want to make it look like the Leafs can get anything for Kerfoot, and I wanted to make it a fair trade, if anything, for every team that was involved in this. Now, let's again look at the full team. This is what the Leafs could have rolled out, and you can sub in pieces that you think could have been on this team rather than the pieces that I have here. So Zach Hyman, Austin Matthews, and Mitch Marner are still in their regular spots. They're still getting paid the same. Mikheyev, I have him, I believe, on a 1 or 2 year deal at $2 million. Now, he's probably not going to make that much money. Again, I over-exaggerated a little bit just to show that even with a little bit of overpayment to every player, the Leafs could have afforded everybody that they needed to. But him probably making $1.8 million makes a little bit more sense to me, just because he needs to prove himself for a full season as he was injured, and I hope he's doing well. Then you have Tavares and Nylander still doing their thing. You can bring up Nick Robertson, which Kyle Dubas said at the time of recording this that he will give every chance to Nick Robertson to make the Leafs. This kid is absolutely insane. If you don't know who he is, look him up. He is by far the Leafs' best prospect, and he is going to be a very good NHL player. Look out for Nick Robertson. But he could be in there. He doesn't have to be in there. You can pull up anybody else. You can switch around the players that are in there. You can send him to the minors. It doesn't matter. You can fill in a guy that's making that much money or a little bit more into his spot, and the Leafs will still be fine. Then you still have Jason Spezza, who said that money's not a problem and he wants to stay in Toronto. You give him a bit of a pay increase to $800,000, and he stays. Then you have Kasperi Kapanen. You also have Pierre Engvall at 1.2. His extension kicks in. Joe Thornton, who also made it clear that money's not an issue and that the Leafs could be a contender to sign him. You give him that $800,000 deal, or maybe even $900,000, depending on how much you want to give him. Or you just put Freddie Gauthier in that spot and you don't sign Joe Thornton, or you don't sign Kyle Clifford, who's the next guy I brought up. But people are saying he should make $2 million. I do not believe he's worth that much money. I think that 1.8 is probably fair. Maybe even if you give him $2 million, the Leafs still can afford to keep him. Or again, like I said, you can mix around players. You don't even have to have him there. There's also a guy that's not in this team that is listed, and that's Alexander Barabanov. The Leafs are rumored to be the finalists to acquire him. He's probably a really good third-line player coming out of Russia. People say he's a little bit smaller than Mikheyev, but he fights with the same intensity. In terms of winning puck battles, he's got good set of hands. He can play the game really well. So another Mikheyev on this Leafs team, even if he's a little bit shorter, sounds pretty damn good to me, and the Leafs could probably sign him to the same amount of money that they would pay a guy like Kyle Clifford, or maybe taking a little bit of money away from Mikheyev. Or you don't bring Robertson up, you just insert you bring Barabanov in there instead and let Robertson grow another year. Or you have both of them on this team. I don't know how it works, but you're able to make both of them fit into this team. And you know what? That's where I'm going to leave it off. You guys can give me your opinions. You can have your armchair GMs. But I was just sick of all the random talk that Leaf fans were basically talking out of their ass, and the media talking out of their ass, not going and looking up players, not going and looking up numbers, not going and looking up the cap friendly. You guys, the team would have been fine without this pandemic. The team is still going to be fine with this pandemic. They just have to make moves to move guys around, and it's going to happen. And that's why I'm also teasing the next video that I'll be doing. It might be the next one or the one after. But it's going to be regarding how the Leafs can still acquire players with a flat cap, or if the cap goes down. There's going to be guys moved. There's guys that are going to get traded no matter what. And there's also a guy that I left off of here. Actually, no, I didn't. Sorry, I'm getting mixed up. Anyway, I mentioned it before, but see, guys, I'm losing my mind. But if you're new to this channel, make sure to subscribe. I've been talking for way too long. Hopefully, you guys stuck around for this whole video. I appreciate you guys, and hopefully, I'll see you in the next video or stream. Stop freaking out, Leaf fans. You're starting to annoy me. Peace.